Every single year, the NBA draft rolls around and fans do the same thing. They get hyped, they make predictions, they crown the next LeBron before the kid even puts on a jersey. Then, half the league, GMs get up on that stage, shake Adam Silver's hand, and make decisions that'll haunt their fan base for the next 5 years. Well, welcome. Today, we're about to break down the 2026 NBA draft. Top prospects, where they're likely to land, which teams actually have a plan, and which ones are going to burn it all down with a smile on their face. So stick around. We got some sleeper picks towards the end, and that could make you look very smart as your next sports bar argument. I'm just saying. So let's get right into it. All right, so now the draft class. What are we working with this year? Let me go ahead and set the table. All right. The 2026 NBA draft has been hyped up all season long. We've been hearing it since the beginning of the season with that incoming freshman class. So, it's been going crazy. They've been talking about it all season long, and this NBA draft is supposed to be one of the biggest we have seen. Analysts have been calling it historically deep at the top. So if you're a lottery team, that's exactly what you want to hear right before you find out rather some ping pong balls like you or not. So the draft is going down next week, June 23rd and 24th at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. I know it's crazy out there in New York right now, but hopefully it settles down a little bit so the folk can get a little bit of rest because excitement's coming right back to the city. Prime time, big stage, big names, the whole 9 yards. But let's get into some of these details though. All right, we got 4 names that you've probably been hearing. You're going to continue to hear. I expect these will be the first 4 coming off the board, but let's talk a little bit about them. First, we're going to talk about my man, Dybantsa. All right, BYU freshman, 6'9", 19 years old. Dude broke a 48-year-old BYU freshman scoring record by going for 43 in a single game. All right, he averaged 25.5 points, led the nation in scoring, gets to the rim at will, operates in the mid-range, and he has that wing size. All these NBA teams right now are obsessed with wings. They want a wing. They want a wing that can defend and score, and he's that, right? So, I think you got to look at it. You got to see his pros and cons. It's a lot of pros, maybe a few cons. I think the knock on him right now is his three-point shooting. Right now it's sitting about 33%. But if he can become a knockdown shooter on top of everything else that he already brings to the table, we might be talking about a generational talent. So this dude right here, widely expected to be the first pick. I think there might be a guy in this draft who could have something to say about that, or at least he thinks otherwise. But we'll see how that shakes out within the next couple days. And since we're on the subject, who thinks they might dethrone Dybantsa for that number 1 slot? Let's talk about the next guy up on the list, Darryn Peterson. There was a lot of noise surrounding this guy from Kansas this year, Kansas guard. He actually entered this season as ESPN's number 1 overall prospect. Unfortunately, he dealt with some injury issues throughout the year, but teams don't seem to be too worried about the medicals and what's going on in that space. So we'll see how it goes. There was the cramps. Is there beef with his coach? Is there issues with the school? We just didn't know. Optically, it didn't look great in his college season as far as, maybe how he handled a few things. But the man's talent is undeniable. He is probably the most gifted pure offensive player in the class. And so when he's healthy, he is a complete menace out there on the court. He's unstoppable. It's actually beautiful to watch just how he can navigate the game offensively. And, he's a winner. He's won at every level. So it'll be interesting to see where he falls. Some scouts do have him ahead of Dybantsa on their personal boards. But it's shaping up to be a real debate for that number 1 spot. I'm anxious, and we'll see what that looks like. Maybe he takes AJ, maybe he doesn't. Either way, the team that gets him, they're going to be a winner. Doesn't matter where he lands. Now on to the third name we need to talk about. None other than Mr. Cameron Boozer. Not a huge Duke fan, UNC guy myself, but Duke forward. Much like his father, Yes, he is the son of former NBA big man Carlos Boozer. And look, we're not saying it's nepotism. It's not that, right? Like, this kid can hoop. He's a skilled four-man, great ball handling, shot making, good passing for his size, right? Some executives, I think, still believe he might be the best player in the class. I don't think that's the case, but nevertheless, he's elite. He's elite. He's in that 3 spot for a reason. I think he could go 3 or 4. The one concern for him is he's not the most explosive athlete. And in today's NBA, that does matter, right? Like, everybody, especially the 3s and 4s, are generally really explosive, can take you off the dribble, can, do a lot of different things. All of them can slash, and not just pick and pop, and they're not very slow. So defensively, that could be a problem for him, I could see in the league. Offensively, I don't know. I don't know what that looks like as far as how it translates and for how long in today's NBA. But nevertheless, he is one of the top talents in the league. I think it's going to be a fit thing, right? Like, does he get to a spot where he truly fits, and is he able to flourish in his role, whatever role that may be? So his dad is in the Utah Jazz front office, so that'll be interesting, as they have one of those top picks, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I don't know, that could be a disadvantage for him, or it could be an advantage for him. We'll see. Hopefully it doesn't make for an awkward dynamic in the league right now. And last but most certainly not least, we got my guy Caleb Wilson out of UNC. North Carolina freshman, 6'10", fast, explosive, plays with an upgraded motor that made evaluators take notice. A lot of scouts have him, or not a lot, but some scouts have him, prefer him over Cameron Boozer. I would say that might be a good option. It just depends. We got to see if there's any movement up there in those top spots. But he could go 3 or 4 as well. He's high on his upside. I think he has a lot of upside. I think the scouts see it as well. I expect him to make an immediate impact in some form, no matter where he lands, right? He's going to be versatile. He's going to be very versatile. Right now, it's hard for me to see him falling out of the top 4. And like I said, I believe he could be right in that 3 spot, just depending on how things fall. So we will see. But that is our Mount Rushmore of this draft class. We got AJ, Darryn, Cameron, Caleb. 4 legit franchise-altering talents in the top 4 picks. That rarely happens. I think location matters, fit matters, but I know that each of these individuals can hoop. Any team that gets these guys are going to be happy, but I think that this is going to be our top 4. All right, so now let's talk about who's picking where and why. Okay, let's see who we have on the clock. With pick number 1 of the 2026 NBA draft, we got the Washington Wizards. Okay, the Washington Wizards won the draft lottery with a 14% chance of the number 1 pick, and boom, they got it. This is the first time since 2010 when they took John Wall, and if you keep a score at home, John Wall did show up to the lottery to rep for his old team, and they won. So that man might be a bit of a good luck charm. They might need to keep him around, somebody get him a job. But last year, the Wizards finished 17-65. That is horrible. It's not just bad, that's horrible. But they did it deliberately, of course, because of what all the noise was around this draft class. There's definitely a little bit of a tanking effort, right? And we've seen some rule changes due to them and some other parties that were partaking in the tank fest. But that was all building towards this moment, and they're ready to cash out, right? So they already went out and got Trae Young last year, Anthony Davis as well. And now they got a young piece in Alex Sarr from a couple drafts ago. They got Keyshawn George, they got Trey Johnson, and they're about to add a number 1 pick to a roster. It's starting to look a little bit interesting. We haven't really heard much noise out of the Wizards in quite some time. It seems like people go there for their career to end. And so that's been unfortunate, but this could be the point where they turn around. They might be able to turn around in the East. I feel like the East is a bit open. There's a lot. I think I do anticipate some movement over there. Obviously, but who knows because guess who's at that number 2 slot? You got the Utah Jazz, and AJ Dybantsa is no stranger to Utah. He went to Utah Prep High School and obviously just went to BYU for his freshman year. So there is a little bit of a relationship there. And then you throw in another wrench that Darryn Peterson has only worked out for the Wizards, and he said he is not working out for anybody else. So what does that mean? I don't know. But we were talking about tanking a little bit earlier, and guess what? The Utah Jazz is in the same boat. They actually had to pay a $500,000 fine to the NBA for conduct detrimental to the league. And that means they tanked a little bit too hard, all right? They was a little in too deep on the tanking party. And Adam Silver said, not on my watch. We going to change that up a little bit. So they paid the fine and then got rewarded in the lottery. Bless them right back with the number 2 pick. So the lesson there is, kids, crime pays sometimes, only sometimes. And I'm just kidding. Do not be a criminal. Okay. Disclaimer. I'm just kidding. I like to kid around sometimes. All right. But looking at the Jazz, what they have on their roster, they already have Lauri Markkanen, Ace Bailey, who they just picked up last year, and Walker Kessler in place. They are very familiar with Dybantsa because, as I said, he was just playing in their backyard at BYU. But here's the wild card. As I mentioned earlier, Cameron Boozer's father, Carlos, works in the Jazz's front office. So if Dybantsa does go number 1 to Washington, Utah might end up picking Cam instead of Darryn. I don't know. A lot to kind of figure out there. I actually think they have a lot to figure out with their roster. So I expect a lot of churn. There'll be a lot of chatter still on the wire over the next few days as they're trying to figure out what they're going to do, what their next moves are. I think we just heard news, Walker Kessler and them trying to do some contract negotiation, and it's not looking too great right now. He wants a little bit more money. I believe he is a restricted free agent, and they don't want to offer him more than like 140 mil, which I think is a little bit much for him, but it is what it is. And Lauri Markkanen's always on the trading block for some reason. I don't know why, but that's what it is. And Ace Bailey never wanted to go to Utah. So there's a lot that they have to figure out. They got to get buy-in for these players, and this is a pretty critical pick for them. I think it's going to be a big deal. They have some real talent on that roster, some young talent, Keontae George. But who knows? Hopefully this pick or whatever they decide to do with it works out, and you can bring that team back to a bit more of a prominent state in a really tough Western Conference. Now let's talk about that number 3 pick, which is going to the Memphis Grizzlies. So the Grizzlies jumped into the top 3 from outside the top 5 in the lottery. So they were celebrating, definitely happy, all vibes, which they were missing out on a lot of the vibes this past season. And the vibe around the league right now is that Memphis feels pretty stress-free in this spot. And why? Because, well, one of the top 4 talents has come to them no matter what. And that's a good place to be in, especially as they look to be undergoing a bit of a rebuild. Shipped off a lot of people over the last year and a half or so, and they might be getting off a job as well, but time will tell there. So they don't have to think too hard. Whoever Washington or Utah doesn't take, they're going to get a top 4 talent. So Bleacher Report right now, the intel says that Boozer is their likely target, but if Peterson falls, he could be there. And Memphis fans would probably start building a shrine, not gonna lie. But we'll see what happens with the 3rd pick. Memphis needs some help for sure, and they look to get it here in the draft. And then we have Chicago Bulls at that number 4 slot. They jumped in the top 4 on lottery night, and that has to feel good for a franchise that hasn't had too much to celebrate recently. Reports are saying Chicago's not locked in on any one player. They're just going to go with who's best available. And by most projections, that means my guy from UNC, Caleb Wilson, will be heading there over to the Windy City. Scouts love his quickness, his motor, his potential as just a long-term cornerstone, which is something that the Bulls could really use. He's visited Chicago and happy about the idea of possibly being the face of their rebuild. So that one seems pretty clean, like a pretty clean and safe bet. And I do anticipate Caleb actually going there, even though I still believe that he could possibly go a bit earlier in that 3 spot. Now, rounding out the top 5, we have the LA Clippers via Indiana. This is where it gets a bit dramatic. The Clippers have this pick because of the trade, and this is the Indiana Pacers' first round pick. So the Pacers also had a 14% shot at the number 1 pick, same as the Wizards, and they got number 5. Their team president literally posted publicly, "I'm really sorry to all our fans. I own taking this risk," and that's rough. But the Clippers, who are already looking for at potential trades, are sitting with 5 and a lot of options in a pretty guard-heavy class. I'm curious to see what happens with them. I feel like there's a lot of drama still, even though it's been quiet around Kawhi Leonard and that whole debacle between him and Ballmer and whatever backdoor deal they may have made. So we'll see where that 5 pick goes, if it gets traded, if they use that to leverage possibly landing a more veteran player, or if they are truly looking to get younger. So a lot to go into that number 5 pick, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what they do. So I'd be remiss not to mention a few other notable spots. Pick 7, we got Sacramento Kings. The Kings are picking here, and the Ringer has a great quote that sums them up perfectly. "It's hard to know what the Kings are doing," and they said it like it's something they just keep saved on their clipboard. But we'll get back to the Sacramento Kings in a minute. At pick 12, OKC Thunder, and that's via the Philly and Clippers trade. Sam Presti is an absolute wizard. He traded the 12th pick years ago and ended up getting Jalen Williams, who's an all-NBA player, and he just got the 12th and potentially 17th pick. There are rumors that OKC could try to package those and move up. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, because Sam Presti is always playing chess while everybody is playing checkers. And let's also keep an eye on Minnesota Timberwolves. So the Wolves are picking somewhere in the teens, and the Ringer put it beautifully. Every draft, they have the same thought. Sure would be nice to add a competent ball handler to this rotation. It's a flat circle every year. A guard-heavy draft should at least give them options as they look to get off of, an aging Mike Conley and find something that's suitable for them for the long term. All right, now this is the part of the video where we get to have some fun, because look, some NBA franchises have turned draft failure into a lifestyle. And so on that note, let's circle right on back to the Sacramento Kings. And I'm not even sure exactly where to begin. This is a franchise that drafted Jimmer Fredette while Kawhi Leonard was on the board. All right, a team that passed on players for reasons that only make sense in Sacramento. The Ringer literally writes them off every year with the same pre-written disclaimer. They're at pick 7 this year in a loaded class. Logic says they can't miss at 7. History says, hold my beer. So we'll see what happens with them. Another team that's a little bit laughable at times, the New Orleans Pelicans. So here's the punchline. The Pelicans had a chance at one of the best draft classes in a decade. And what did they do? They traded their 2026 first round pick last year for the 13th pick in the 2025 draft. Let that sink in. The basketball world cackled when this happened, because everyone could see what was coming: a terrible Pelican season and a loaded 2026 draft class. Both happened. The Pelicans will not have a first round pick on draft night, and they're going to be watching from home. So this is the NBA equivalent of trading a winning lottery ticket for a scratch off. It's absolutely crazy to me. And then we have the Charlotte Hornets, sitting at pick 8 or 9 in the lottery. The Hornets are one of those teams that seem to always be picking in the lottery, but never actually getting better. It's quite a mystery. Obviously, they picked up Con Kneppel last year, which I think was big, and they did make some jumps. So let me not rail on them too hard. And I'm sure they'll pick somebody reasonable. The fan base will actually cautiously get excited, and then something will happen, because it always does in Charlotte. But let's see what happens this time around on the next episode of the Charlotte Hornets. So last call out, Portland Trailblazers. All right, they got a pick in the late lottery, and they're in full rebuild mode. Portland has some legitimate high picks in recent years, and hasn't quite landed the star yet. They need everything. They need scoring, playmaking, defense. The good news is this class is deep. It's kind of hard to truly whiff in the lottery, and then obviously they have Dame coming back, so we'll see what that looks like for them this year and what they do in the draft. And to be fair, some organizations have actually mastered this and mastered what they do in draft night. Boston tends to draft guys in the second round and turn them into contributors. OKC, as we mentioned, with Sam Presti, has a nuclear stockpile of future assets. And San Antonio keeps finding guys. That's just something that they've always done. So they do that in perpetuity. Quite awesome, to be honest. Those teams do their homework. The rest, they're just rolling the dice and hoping nobody notices. All right, now here's where we separate the casual fans from the real ones and we get into our bag a little bit. Let's talk about some sleeper picks, all right? Now, these are guys who might not go in the lottery, might not even go in the first round, but they have some tools to shot people down the line. Jalen Brunson, for instance, was a second-round pick. Nikola Jokic was a second-round pick. Draymond Green, second round. Right, so the second round is where legends are quietly born. All right, so we're going to start that list off with Joshua Jefferson. All right, another 6'9" guy, big body, 240. All right, he's had a complete makeover this past season, improved his three-point shooting, has new playmaking responsibilities, and he's tough around the basket with some real defensive instincts. He'll probably go in the second round just because of his age. He's going to turn 23 in his rookie year, so he's already, coming into the league pretty mature. But teams who value versatility and skill over just raw upside will definitely be calling his name. And then next, Jaden Bradley, young boy out of U of A. So CBS Sports is high on this guy, right, as a second-round sleeper with just legitimate starter upside. He was a senior guard, averaged 13 points, 4.4 assists, 3.4 rebounds, and shot about 40% from three in his final college season. The frame is right, the shooting form is right, the attitude is right. If you're a team that needs a guard who comes to play every night and doesn't need to be the guy, Bradley could be an absolute steal. Then we've got Terrence Reed. Sports analysts are saying he's a second-round sleeper nobody's talking about, but we're going to talk about him. His stock shot up after a strong combine performance and just great NCAA tournament run overall. He plays with power, rebounds in traffic, protects the rim, and has enough passing field to avoid being a liability. If he falls into the 30s, whoever grabs him might be getting a ready-made backup center who brings playoff-level physicality from day one. And then we got our guy, Alex Caravan. 151 college games, 3 Final Fours. This man has seen more big moments in college basketball than most players see in a career. He's 23, NBA ready as a shooter, cutter, and professional. He might not have the flashiest combine numbers, but he showed improved athleticism this year, and teams know exactly what they're getting. Sometimes a sure thing is the best gamble. Now let's talk about our guy, Bennett Sturts. Averaged 19.8 points, 4.4 assists, and 1.4 steals per game in his senior season with a 60.7 true shooting percentage. He's not the most electric athlete. He won't wow you at the combine, but he can run an offense, shoot off movement, make quick decisions, and play at a pace that translates at this level. He's kind of a guy that, ends up starting 60 games 3 seasons from now, and everyone's going to be like, dang, where did he come from? So just remember, you heard it here first. Bennett Sturts, true sleeper pick. But before we wrap up today, we do have to talk about the elephant in the room. That elephant is Giannis Antetokounmpo. All right, ESPN reported back in May that the Bucks were open to trading the 2-time MVP. And right now, the entire NBA is in a holding pattern, just waiting to see what happens. Why does this matter for the draft? Well, if Giannis gets moved before June 23rd, it reshapes what teams do with their picks. A team that wasn't in the Giannis conversation might suddenly be looking to move up or move out. Picks become currency, and the whole board shifts. It's like everyone is playing poker, and one guy at the table hasn't shown their hand yet. And that guy in this situation is Milwaukee. So keep your eyes open on that storyline heading into draft night, because it really could change everything. And there you have it, folks. The top of the draft looks elite. Washington takes Dybantsa, Utah grabs Peterson or Boozer, Memphis takes whoever falls, and Chicago locks in Caleb Wilson. Clean, logical, maybe even boring, unless someone surprises us. But we know what the NBA draft is really about. It's not about who should get picked. It's about that one moment. Some GM who's had a weird offseason, looking at a name nobody expected, and they go off script. And then 5 years from now, we're either calling it genius or we're making a YouTube video about the collapse. So if you're new here, hit subscribe, hit like, all that good stuff. Week to week, month to month, we're going to break down some of the biggest moments in sports. No fluff and no filter. Drop a comment. Who do you think goes number one, Dybantsa or Peterson? And as always, stay locked in, baby. Draft night is right around the corner.